if there's a time when I finally got to beat this guy, it's gonna be today. Right? Because I'm always pushing against him. I'm always pushing and he finds these resources because he's a very good defender. So I felt, I gotta do this. So I play d4. d4, it follows my philosophy is that I should switch to the queen's pawn opening. Because I've been playing e4, dear viewers, all my life. e4, then I switched to some reti, some c4. But d4 is according to my philosophy, how I should be actually playing chess. So it's very easy to play it. And I was expecting some King's Indian defense. Because normally Dmitry against the d4, he plays something like this. And then I was thinking about setting up one of the positions and just to get a game. Now my opponent suddenly plays d6. And I'm thinking, of course I can still switch to King's Indian defense. But why can't I play e4? Let's play the Pirtsov-Imtsev. I'm completely fine with this. So I play e4, it's like a transposition of the moves, e4, d6, d4, and I love this system, so why not? A small victory for me. He played knight f6, knight c3, e5. This system is quite popular among players who don't want to study any opening theory, because it's very easy for white to go astray here if you don't know. The first obvious choice that everybody wants to play is like, ooh, I can take it and I can trade the queens. And it seems great, right? I have a lead in development, small lead in development, his king is walking, he has some weaknesses. But if you would look at this position more closely, you would realize it's very difficult for white to get anything real. Because let's say I play bishop c4, attack the pawn on f7. I think he could even play, if I remember correctly, this. Take it. I play knight f3. He plays knight c6. Either bishop c5, bishop b4, even bishop d6, king e7, knight e4. Rock solid. And the king on e7 feels so nice. These weaknesses are very, very difficult to get to. So I've been not playing in any similar games d takes on e5 ever again, right? So luckily I don't have to do this. I play knight e2. The reason of knight e2 is to prepare to play g3, bishop g2. Maybe more accurate is to play knight f3. Yeah, but then again there's some big theory, knight e7, bishop c4, bishop e7. I don't think you can go for this idea, knight g5, knight e6, black is doing fine. And then h3, c6, a5, again, big theory. But white is doing great. And I like this move in knight e2 because then if I get to play this g3, bishop g2, should castle h3, I can very quickly play f4. f4, f5, g4, g5, and the knight on e2 actually stands perfectly for this type of position. My opponent shrugged here for a moment. What's the big difference? Knight f3, knight e2, and he took on d4 anyway. Knight e4, bishop e7, and g3. So, I'm about to set up my position, put the bishop on g2. I'll tell you honestly, I remembered nothing of the opening theory. I was wondering what happens if he plays d5. I thought I'm gonna figure it out. d5, e5, knight e4. I thought I can play bishop g2, some look-alike Petrov position. I probably thought I can take on e4, play bishop f4, queen d5, knight b5. So I was briefly looking at these lines and thinking if this is gonna happen. Well, probably not, but even if this happens, I'm gonna figure it out. So he didn't play d5. He played knight c6, which I thought was a pretty weird move. I guess I cannot really take on c6 and play bishop g2. Because there could be, I'm not saying there are gonna be, but there could be some problems with bishop a6. I cannot castle short. And e5, d takes, bishop c6, knight e7. Who knows what is this? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Engine says this is really great for white. Maybe it is. You know, but I was not really seriously looking at all of this because I saw this bishop a6 idea, so why do I need this? So I just play bishop g2. He took on d4, queen d4, played show castle. And he was doing this very quickly, you know? Very, very quickly. So having spent like 3-4 minutes on the clock, played all these moves. And I thought, there's no way that you're going to equalize against me with black playing so quickly the Pirtsov himself. So I was looking for a longer fight here. And one of the ideas I was seriously considering is castling long, because his king already is committed to the short side, but the question is how to do it. If I play, let's say, bishop f4, he could play c6, I could play a long castle, he could play something like queen a5, sacrifice the pawn on d6. Like, I'm not really sure if this is any good, but there could be a lot of counterplay. Right? I mean, not even speaking about the pawn on a2. So, I mean, who knows, right? I felt that castling long, this is quite a risky choice. And to be honest, I didn't really feel I have to do this. A second idea I was thinking about b3, bishop b2, position the bishop on the long diagonal. So I thought he's gonna play something like c6, bishop b2, a rook e8, bishop f8, g6, bishop g7, or even maybe after b3, knight e7 immediately. But then after knight e5, I'm trying to play bishop f6, a bishop b2, and I simply get a two bishop advantage, which I was pretty happy, you know. If I get this position, king f2, bishop b2, there you go. You play your d5, open up the position, I have my two bishops. And if you want to know more details, just watch one of my boot camps, the two bishop pair, and how to properly utilize the power of two bishops in a chess game. So I wasn't really sure if I should play b3, but I played the show castle. He plays c6. And now this gives me some information. Because after c6, the pawn on d6 becomes a target, so why should I even consider b3, bishop b2, when I can play bishop f4 immediately? I mean, the idea is very simple. Rook d1, target the pawn on d6. So, what are you going to do? So he played queen b6 as expected, attacking the queen on d4, targeting the pawn on b2. And my first idea was, I should probably take on b6, play rook d1, and then play the target is pawn on d6, and then play a4 and fix the pawn on b6 as a second weakness. But then I started to look at he has ideas like b5. b5, threatening b4, go after the pawn on a2. For example, if I take, I mean, I think black is doing very much fine. Okay, maybe Engine is going to find some advantage here, but you know, I was not so sure. And if I play a3 here, after a3, black just plays rook d8, bishop e6, and he has solved one problem of one weakness. So that's why I felt that this is a very important moment, and I have to start with rook d1 first. And the point is, I offer him to trade, but then he has difficulties to defend the pawn on d6. And knight e8, I'm so sorry, but this is so ugly. This feels like a Vienna. I'm not really sure. Vienna? No, it doesn't feel like Vienna. Maybe, I'm not sure about which line you're talking about, but no, it doesn't feel like Vienna to me. So what I was thinking here, I'm gonna play something like knight e2, c4, again build up Marozzi bind, bishop f6, z5 stuff. So, I mean, he has problems. He has simply problems here in this position. But still, maybe he had to do this. Also, of course, I mean, queen b2 is a big blunder, right? Queen b2, I play knight e5. I mean, this is very basic, so, I mean, knight e5 drops the queen, and if you take on d4, there's knight e7 check, and then you take the queen. But, of course, I didn't really expect this, that he's gonna take the pawn on b2. he played rook d8, and I got him. I got him exactly where I wanted. Now I take on b6 and I play a4. Ah, wait, by the way, one more moment. You might be wondering why the order of the moves matter. Why I don't start with queen b6, I take some b6 and play a4. So what's the big deal? So I'm gonna play rook d1 later. Well, the devil is in the details. Because if I do this, he doesn't have to play rook d8. And he gets to play knight e7, knight e5. Activate the knight. Because the knight on f6 actually is as weird as it sounds, it's terrible. And the knight on d7 can do some things and also open up the f6 square later for the bishop. And with this order of the moves, I force him to play rook d8. Now I take on b6, I play f4, and you see he can't play knight e7 anymore because the pawn on d6 is under attack. How about that? He of course could try to play knight g4, knight g4, knight e5. Let's say h3, knight e5, b3, and then how do you get the knight on c5? Okay, maybe this is still sort of playable. Like bishop e3, knight e7, knight e2, knight e4. Oh my goodness. It's so bad. It's so bad for black, right? He has no counterplay, or again, we're gonna get to this. No pawn play. You're gonna see again why this is so important that your pawns are fluid. They're moving forward. They're able to create targets. I mean, look at black's position. No, no, probably no, because there's gonna be knight e4. While I have the entire king side at my disposal. So after a4, what happened? He played bishop e6. I played pretty quickly b3 without any thinking. I thought I can play knight e2, knight e4. And as soon as I played b3, I started to kick myself. I mean, why did I not even think closer about rook c8? Because rook c8 is a very good move. He's threatening two ideas. One of them is d5, the second one is b5. And actually it's such an obvious move because he can't play d5. There's always bishop c7 attacking the pawn on b6. So in order to stop this, I figured out that rook c8 is such an obvious move, right? I mean, protect the c7 square. And after b5 takes, he's opening up the c file. I was not really sure if I have any real advantage here anymore. I kind of had a feeling that I maybe misplayed with this move b3. Perhaps I should have started with something like h3 or rook d2 first. By the way, rook d2, there was a knight g4 threat with the idea to play knight e5, and h3, I always needed to watch out for g5. So he's killing my ducks with bishops, so I can't do this. H takes, g takes, bishop g4, nightmare. Right, opens the ducks with bishop, it's gonna rock and roll on the dark squares. So again, a lot of calculation for my opponent was necessary. Anyway, so I played b3, and I figured out that after rook c8, even though I had a feeling I slightly misplayed this position, there's bishop e3, b5, bishop b6, attacking the rook, and whatever he does, I thought I have at least this idea. So I repositioned the bishop on b4, target the pawn on d6, I want to play knight b5 later. Is this enough for advantage? That I was not sure. And again, the line probably continues here. For example, I could have taken on b6 immediately, on b5 immediately. Like here, rook c3. But the question is this anything real? Like knight e6, f takes on e6. The rook is very active here. Probably not enough. But my opponent missed this. Right, he missed this idea that b5 might be a possibility. Rook d2, d5 is an idea. Takes, knight e5, c takes on d5, bishop f6. I think it's just equal. Is it bad allowing him to capture on c2 if I get a counter against d6? That is a very good question. I tell you honestly, Stas the droid, I was not sure. All I know is that I try to get a position where my opponent has no counterplay. Because right now it's a weakness on d6 and it's weakness on b6. And according to Neiksans' postulated rule that you should try to create a second weakness against your opponent in order to, capitalize on the advantage, I definitely did not want to give him a chance to organize a counterplay. And if he plays b5, he gets rid of this one weakness. So that's why I was a bit unhappy about this b3, right? I felt that, I should have spent a bit more time and some nuances because, rook c8, at least from my level, I thought this is a pretty obvious move. And I was very unhappy I missed it. But so did he. And he played h6, move which Dmitry after the game would criticize. He said that's a ridiculous move. His idea at some point, I guess, was to play g5 to push away the knight, the bishop. I played bishop e3 anyway, knight e7, and now this is the position where I could have gotten with the most accurate mode of the moves. What was the accurate mode of the moves? If I had played bishop e3 right now, attack the pawn, there's no b5, I just take on b5, and after knight e7, now I play b3. So this was the absolute best order of the moves. I make sure there is no breakthroughs. And if he now plays rook c8, I can play rook d2. So again, you see a lot of importances are in the smallest details. So he played h6, I played bishop e3, knight e7, I played rook d2, knight c5, rook d1, played very quickly, and I'm thinking, when I'm thinking about this position, my opponent could play f5. I'm thinking about this, he could play f5 here. But I'm like, come on, there's always bishop h3, right? It cannot be that bishop h3, that f5 works. F5, bishop h3, I calculate any captures on e4 are pretty bad. And if he plays rook f8, the pin still remains. I'm gonna figure it out, right? So there's no way he's gonna do this. There's no way, so that's why I played just rook d1 with the simple threat of bishop f4. And he plays f5, and I'm going mad inside. Why? Why? I had like 15 minutes on the clock. Just sit and figure it out, man, right? You have 50 minutes on the clock, and I'm just assuming that if 5 is not working because of this and because of that, just figure it out, right? And apparently my opponent sat here for a good 20 minutes. He plays it anyway, and I start to calculate, and I realize it's a move. Because check this out. Let's say after f5, bishop h3, I start to calculate this again. Let's say he takes on e4. This is my initial idea. Bishop e6, knight e6, and I calculate from afar knight e4. No, wait, what was it? I calculate bishop b6. Yeah, this is what I calculated initially. And the idea, if this rook is gonna go away, I grab the pawn, I'm doing great. Of course, I still had to, very precisely calculate. There's all kinds of pins, all kinds of threats. Oh my goodness. But I gotta believe that it's gonna work. Very sloppy calculation, to be honest. But, look at this. There's some crazy stuff here. Somehow it ends with a draw, right? Hey, Jim Solver. There's some crazy lines. I had a feeling, somehow probably there could be rook a6, d5, bishop e4, d4, etc. But I convinced myself I'm gonna figure it out because I'm still up a pawn, and in case things go bad, I can always drop some material back. So anyway, what I was calculating initially, what happens if he sacrifices an exchange? So d5, bishop d8, and rook d8. Because actually it's not so simple. If he gets to play bishop b4 or knight g5, knight f3, look at these monsters here. So I had already pretty much made up my mind that I'm going to sacrifice a piece. And because of this pawn, it's a weakness. Rook d7 is a big threat. Rook e5 is a threat. I believed that I will have the better chances. Right? So I was not really sure what's the right order of moves. Actually, Engine says knight e4 is the most accurate move because after d5 I can still play bishop b6. And now apparently after rook f8, knight c3, rook a6, there's some rook e2 difference, you know, not bishop e3, whatever. I'm not gonna bore you with the details, but the idea still remains the same. I can play bishop e6, I can take on d8, and something like rook e2, rook f6, rook d7. I'm having a rook and 2 pawns versus 2 minor pieces. So I think this is better for me. The knight on d8 is pretty bad, so I don't know. So I was thinking something like this, calculating along the lines, and I was calculating this after bishop h3. And there was the other move. Remember, right? I told you I didn't really believe it's possible to play rook f8. He plays rook f8. And now I start to think. All right, listen. How on earth do I exploit the spin? Actually, after the game, Dmitry said this is why he regretted having eluded h6 earlier. Remember? Remember this move? He said he shouldn't have included this because if he wants to play f5 at some point later, he could have g6. Now he doesn't have g6 because the pawn on h6 hangs. So, again, he's completely right? Of course, remember, dear viewers, not to touch your kingside pawns for no good reason. Right? You might be weakening some stuff. So anyway, after rook f8, I'm thinking how to exploit this. I'm thinking. I realize I have nothing. Here. So the best thing I can come up with, I was thinking here about some quiet moves, king g2, but he still takes on e4. And actually even in this position, you see, his rook is conveniently gone from the d8 square. And after knight e4, I can even get worse very quickly. d5, knight c3, bishop b4, rook d3, d4, easy. Very easy to get downhill from here. So that's why I felt that this position requires a very big decision. A very big decision. So I spent here like 20-25 minutes and I made a very bold move. I took on c5. It's a move you normally don't want to make because it's handing all the dark squares on the platter and black's bishop here is going to be very strong. I think d takes on c5 we can rule it out because these 4 pawns against 3 are not going to do well. I'm simply going to have a pawn majority at the king side. Just play bishop f5, trade the bishops, do fine, rook d7. So b takes on c5. And now my idea was to play rook e2, threaten to take on f5 and see what happens. So one of the basic ideas I was calculating, let's say rook e8, I take on f5, he takes on f5, and I take on d6. So one of the lines where I get to keep my pawn, obviously you see bishop d6, drops the rook on e8, I go back and then I start to convert my extra pawn. I was also calculating all kinds of other moves. Let's say he plays bishop f6, I play rook takes on d6, bishop c3, rook e6, I keep my extra pawn again. And I was looking for some other moves, and now suddenly I realize, what if my opponent sacrifices a pawn right here and he plays bishop f7? And I'm like, when I see this, I start to not to feel well. Because there's suddenly a big threat. Bishop h5. Right? So, I mean, if I take with a pawn, he's gonna play rook e8, d5, bishop f6. I mean, look at these bishops with a strong center. This is exactly where your game could go wrong. And my 2 extra pawns at the king side don't really feel, they're doubled. So I'm thinking, okay, bishop f7 definitely looks interesting. I could take on f5. And then I'm looking if he plays bishop h5. I play probably g4. I have to calculate exchange sacrifice. E takes on e5, bishop g4, rook e7, bishop d1. There's knight e1. I'm doing great. So I need to watch out for this exchange sacrifice. Then I'm thinking he might go back, try to trap my bishop. I played e5, he plays d5. I play e6, he plays bishop e8. And I'm thinking, what on earth is this position? How on earth did I get here? It's such a tactical mess. You know, I have my extra pawn. He has two bishops. He has the center. He has some g6, king g7 ideas. You know, I would actually play this position with black. If I would have to choose, my knight on c3 is pretty bad. My extra pawn doesn't feel. But I see nothing better. Because I already have no choice. 95? What 95? Oh, you mean here? No. I mean, this is a bit too much. I have 3 pawns for the piece, but his bishops will be very strong. Right? No, not here 95. So I realized, oh my goodness, bishop f7 is such a monster move. And I'm praying that he's not gonna find it, right? Because after this, I'm not sure. It would be a totally 3-result game. And my opponent plays rook e8. Which I was very, very happy to see. Because now I'm thinking, how do I properly get to this endgame? This endgame. Because I'm pretty sure that my opponent will realize that that endgame is not perspective, and the logical follow-up is that he's gonna figure it out that he has to sacrifice a pawn. So I'm thinking, if I'm gonna take with a pawn, he might play bishop f7, no take on f5. Then I'm thinking rook e1, bishop d8, d5, bishop a5, and I try to validate. I don't like it. And that's precisely the reason I take with the bishop. And again, I'm hoping he's not gonna play bishop f7, which my opponent said he noticed. But the point is, he already is committed to rook e8. Because if he wanted to play bishop f7, it made sense to start it a move earlier. Because now bishop f7 makes no sense at all. I mean, it's still a good move, but effectively black has wasted time for rook e8. Like, black is psychologically trapped with his move, right? He committed himself to rook e8, and now he still had to gather the courage and play bishop f7, and he saw this move right now. But now he was not really happy about the last move, rook e8. So what happened here? He played bishop f6. How bad is the endgame after bishop f5 and d5? It is bad, because this pin kills. I mean, you have to play king f7 and you simply physically cannot get rid of the pin by not trading both rooks. You cannot do it, right? So I'm gonna play whatever. g4, remove the knight, trade the rooks, f4, king g2, king f3. It just lost. I mean, okay, there could be some counterplay at the queen side because of this one extra pawn and the bishop, but normally this should be lost. I believe so, right? I might be wrong. Yeah, I mean, for black, it's, you know, let me tell you one thing. I have said this many times before, and I'm gonna repeat it again. It's very difficult to be objective in a worse position. And I think that probably if somebody said it best, it was the former world champion Tigran Petrosian who said, bad positions produce even more bad moves, right? So when you have a great position and you're thinking between a couple of great moves, everybody likes to choose between great moves, right? Because this move is extra pawn, this move I have a strong attack, that move I have a good endgame. You know, you're choosing, you're feeling good inside. But when you have a bad position, I mean, this move is bad. This move just outright sucks. After this move, your king is weak, and this move is just plain ugly. And you have to choose between these 3-4 moves. And it's very depressing, you know? It's very depressing for most of the people to choose between these bad combinations because, I mean, you have a feeling that probably none of them is good. And you still have to choose this lesser evil. And there are not so many players in professional circuit who can make the right choice. I mean, literally most of the players, they go downhill once they get these terrible worst positions. Because engine of course holds it easily, but for a human being when you have to choose between ugly, worse and terrible choices, it's very difficult to be objective. Anyway, so he played bishop f6, which was a move which I simply missed from afar. Now black is threatening to take on c3. Obviously I have to take on e6, there's no choice. Yeah, I was thinking also about sacrificing a pawn with e5. I mean, the point is, rook e5, I take on d6, I'm up an extra pawn, and d takes on e5, d takes on e5, I have knight e4. Rook e2, beautiful knight against the bad bishop, etc. But I could not find a follow-up after bishop e5, and despite the fact the spin is there at e-file, there's no f4, there's always bishop d4, f4, bishop d4. So, I can't do it. I really wanted to play rook d3 initially. And now the point is, after rook d3, I did not see physically this move, rook d2. Bishop c3, rook e4, rook d6, I'm keeping my extra pawn. All I saw was this move, f3, d5, and king f1, with the threat to take on e4, on d5. But I almost blundered from afar this idea. So I can't do it, right? And I had to calculate all kinds of things, how to keep my extra pawn. So in the end, I decided to play knight b1. The point is also bishop d4 now is simply driven away with c3, so there's no counterplay against the pawn on f2. So he played d5, rook e1, and I was so happy to find the following idea. If he plays rook e8, there's a very beautiful move, king f1. And the pawn is temporarily sacrificed, but I'm always getting back. Let's say d takes, knight e2, I'm winning a pawn. Bishop c3, rook e4. He can't do nothing. Rook e4, I'm winning my pawn. So he can't use the spin at all. So I was very, very proud. I found this idea, king f1. I'm threatening to take on d5. The bishop here is useless. If he plays d4, I play 4 e5, and my pawn simply start to roll forward. So that's why he had to, accept the trade, play rook d8, and this was a really nice idea because he thought after rook e1, the natural choice, he's going to continue with c4. c4, b takes, rook d4, knight a3, whatever. Maybe bishop d8, bishop e6, rook d2, bishop c5, a lot of targets, very good drawing chances. And if I do nothing, he's gonna take it and play rook d3 and have a very good active defense. Well, all of that is nice on paper, because I could just play king f1. Actually, engine says knight a3 is so much stronger. I disagree. I think this entire line is not quite human. I'm not thinking like this, to be honest, right? So go knight a3, then I have to go back, king e1, king d1, and somehow he's overloaded and he's losing the piece on c3. Okay, I'm not thinking like this at all. So I'm thinking rook d1 check is a threat, so I have to defend it against it, and I play king f1. So that there's this move. He plays c4. Yeah, too lazy to calculate. c4, b takes, weakens too many pawns, I cannot accept it, rook c4 drops a piece, so I play king e2. No choice for black, take, and king f7. Alright, and there we go. So, the complications have finished, and we have reached a very nice technical endgame, where you gotta show your converting material advantage technique. Not as easy as it looks, but I believe that this position for black is very difficult to hold. Why is this? Because I can toy with the idea to enter a rook endgame, meaning I can offer at some point to trade the knight for the bishop, and my opponent probably is going to decline. I mean, depending on the situation. But I can also use these queenside pawns to create some targets at the queenside, while at the same time black cannot easily trade any pawns at the kingside. So I was actually thinking maybe he should have played b5. You know, b5 takes, and but there's a fair chance that this pawn actually might become a target with moves like rook b4 or knight a3. Very, very big decision for black, because if he loses the second pawn, that's it, the game's done. So he can't easily play b5. He played king f7. I play knight e2 without thinking. I play knight f3 without thinking. And now I'm thinking, how do I get the knight on the e3? And probably the right way to continue was knight e1 and knight e3. But I really want to play knight e5 with a check. And I look at this line, and I try to evaluate if I'm not giving my opponent too much counterplay. Let's say rook e3, c5, rook c3, rook b4, king d3, c4. And from afar I didn't like this, although now I see that there's rook b3, I have some counterplay here, I could still have very good winning chances in the rook endgame. King c5, king b6, c5, activate rook, get to the pawn on b7, probably just winning. I mean, maybe I could even position the rook on b6, rook g6, fix these pawns, push them as far as I can so that he cannot organize any counterplay from the queen side. But let me tell you this. I have one rule, and I intend to follow it. And the rule sounds as follows. Never do funny business in a dominating position. Why is this? Why this rule is so important? Because when you are the dominating side, you have the dominating position. You can choose how to simplify the position. And I'm not sure if I want to rush with this knight e5, if I'm not sure about the same game. And I'm thinking actually in the king side, knight e1, knight e3 was probably the smarter choice. I mean, not really offer this knight trade if you're not sure. And that's the reason, that's precisely the reason why king e3 is the move to play, because I'm taking care of the d4 square. Yeah, accidental novelty, I see what you're saying, you're giving away some wins with funny business. You're not the only one. But that's why there's this strict rule. If you are the dominating side, never any funny business. No risk, control the game. Your point is to get the game from point A, where you have a large advantage, to point B, where your opponent resigns, with no adventures, no beautiful ideas, no tactics in between, which involves some risk. So you want to get to the final position with as little risk as possible. So you don't want to gamble. You can gamble when you have a bad position, but when you have a great position, you don't want to toss a coin. So that's why I play king e3, and I'm thinking now I'm threatening to play knight e5, and after the rook trade, he no longer has rook d4, rook b4. Also, he can't go rook d1 because I'm bothering his pawns with rook b4. So he can't easily activate his rook. He played bishop e7, now he gave a check, king f6, knight e3, bishop d6. Alright, and now the big question is, how do we make a progress? Now, I think it's very important here to remember some of the principles which I remember best from Mark Dvoretsky's endgame manual. Probably he was not the first one to say it, but I remember him quoting this. And the rule is as follows. If you are the stronger side, meaning you have the material advantage, what do you have to do? You want to trade pieces. So, I have the material advantage, I want to trade pieces. I want to trade rooks. I want to trade knight versus bishop. Why? Because the pawn endgame will be winning. So what does black or the weaker side want to do? He wants to trade as many pawns as he can. And that's why actually I was going for this position before. I was looking at this. Maybe he had to think about this b5 idea after all. To trade a couple of these pawns. He did not. He was afraid he's gonna lose this pawn. But later, he no longer has the chance to do it. Also, he wants to trade the pawns at the queen side. So what do? I play h4. I try to fix some weaknesses. I'm thinking about h5. Maybe idea will be rook g4, rook g6. And if he plays g5, so what do you think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna play h5. And after h5, I'm thinking about g4, f3, king e2, remove the knight, and put it on f5. And now with the knight on f5, look at this, the pawn on h6 is a nice target. A very serious weakness, and the bishop at f8 will be passively defending it. Unless somehow now he manages to trade the bishop for the knight and enter this rook endgame, which might as well be lost. Maybe. So he can't easily trade these pawns. He played h5. Now I play knight f4. I gamble with the trade. I'm thinking if he's going to trade, I'm going to position my rook on b4 and slowly push these pawns. You know, king e4, f3, g4, etc. I have my extra pawn. I have an active rook. I have an active king. Should be good enough. My opponent is not sure about this trade. The pawn on h5 is under attack. He plays g6. Now I start to scare him with some ideas here. Check. Yeah, bishop a3 first. Bishop c1, bishop h6. We're toying with the ideas. Knight f4, bishop f8, knight e3, go back. So nothing really changed. Now I'm thinking, okay, so this is probably the perfect position. If he plays g5, tries to trade a couple of pawns, the pawn on h5 makes an easy target. Right, I could think about ideas like rook e4, rook e5, knight f4 ideas. It's going to be very difficult for him to hold on to this pawn, assuming that he can't trade any pieces because it improves my odds. So he can't really easily trade this pawn on g5. So he played rook e8 check, king d2, rook d8, and I'm thinking I need to create another target at the queen side. So I play a5. The threat is a6, b takes, rook d6, attack this pawn, offer a rook trade, and then maybe activate the king in the process. He has a deep think, he doesn't know what to do. And finally he picks up the best defense, rook d5. And now, based on what you know, now here's a very important question. I mean, dear viewers, you've been following this game so far. What do you think about this endgame? a6, rook c6. This is what we wanted, right? Takes, takes, king e3, king e5. Are you gonna go here? Think about it for a minute. Are you gonna go here? Because we're strictly following the Dvoretsky's, I mean, whoever was it before him. But I'm quoting Dvoretsky. Dvoretsky's rule. If you are the stronger side, you're trading pieces. I'm trading pieces. If you are the weaker side, you're not supposed to trade pieces. Yeah, you wish you could get rid of the bishop, but you are not gonna get rid of the bishop. And your opponent wants to trade pawns. Remember, he wants to play g5, f4. These pawns are on the color of his opponent's bishop. You know, actually, I think this is the perfect moment to remind you of this rule. No funny business in a dominating position. This is one of them. At least I think so. I mean, you are the dominating side with white, right? So why would we want to enter an endgame which might be winning and might also not be winning? Because I'm not a seer. I'm not sure. I mean, if you ask me if this position is totally winning, as a grandmaster, I'm saying, I don't know. Yeah, there's good chances, of course, but I'm not sure. There's so little pawns on the board. G5, H4 is incoming. And again, I simply follow the rule. If I'm not sure, I'm not doing funny business. I'm not entering this endgame just because there's such a rule. A rule that the stronger side wants to trade the pieces. And very often in chess, you're going to see that there's a conflict of rules. So right now, there's a conflict of rules. So from one side, we have the Redskins rule that you are the stronger side, you want to trade the pieces. And from the other side, there's the no funny business rule. You are the dominating side. You want to control things. And a6 idea is never going to disappear. So we play b4. So we decline. We decline to go for an endgame which we are not sure. And actually this is quite interesting because we're positioning all the pawns on the color of the opponent's bishop. So it seems that this bishop could be quite a problem at some point later. But the big idea is to play at some point king c3, knight c5, or king c3, a6, get to this weakness with knight c5, and eventually crash through at the queen side. So that's why here I figured out that probably I no longer want to trade rooks. So if I play king c3, there's going to be bishop g7, king e2, rook d4, and this position again, I am not sure. Not sure at all because these pawns make very fine targets. The king probably is going to go to e5, some are centralized. I'm not sure. If I'm not sure, I'm not doing this. So that's why the king went the other way. King e3, rook b5. I mean, he can't stop king e4, centralizing the king, because this drops a piece. Quite unfortunate for black to have the bishop of the fate. Rook b5. Before I start with king e4, I include king d4. And I kind of believe that his strongest defense was to get the king to c7. But the king d7 involves calculating whatever happens after knight e5. I'll tell you honestly, I kind of bluffed with this. Because I had no intentions to go knight e5, king c7, knight g6, bishop b4, knight f4, bishop a5, and whatever. Maybe this is even winning. But again, it's simple a breaking of the rule, no funny business in a dominating position, right? So I would never go here. Why would I want to give any counterplay for my opponent? So after king d7, I was thinking about king c3, relieve the bishop, activate the rook, put the king on c4, and then again look for this way to make knight c5 happen. He gave a check on g7, king e4, king d6, and here my heart almost stopped. I'm thinking, that's it. The game is winning. That's it. I can play rook c5. And I mean, the point is, after rook c5, if he trades, knight c5, king c7, knight e6 is a fork. Yeah, and if he does something else, like, I don't know, bishop f6, I take on here, knight f4, knight c5, I can give you up these pawns, I'm going to collect these 3 pawns, should be a win. Oh my goodness, I don't know, this is rook b4. I was like, oh my god. Oh my god, I almost blundered this. So yeah, it took me a couple of minutes to calm down because I really wanted to play rook c5, and now I had to play knight c5 instead. Imprison the rook on b5. Again, it's very difficult for black to leave a lead defense because if the bishop leaves this diagonal, there's rook d4, rook d7. b6 loses in a stunning fashion. Already here I got this idea to play a6 and a7. So this pawn cannot be stopped. And even if he plays king c7, I still play a7. You see, I mean, there's no king b7, there's no rook a5, and the rook on b5 is doing nothing. So he can't play b6, liquidate those pawns. Again, he can't follow the Redskins rule to trade the pawns. So he played king e7, I play king d3, I try to get the king on c4. I watch out for b6, always. And I know there's always going to be a6. King f7, rook f4. I want to put the king here, rook e4, rook e6, activate the king, maybe somehow get a way to get the rook on d7. He plays king g8, which I thought was pretty odd, but then again it's very difficult to suggest him anything. And now again, after b6 I have the same idea. I can play a6, a7, here, and this pawn is simply promoting, right? I mean, rook b5 check, king a6, and this pawn is promoting. So there's nothing that black can do. But to be honest, yeah, I think knight b3 is also just fine. Knight b3, b takes, but same idea as push the pawn forward. So should already be a win. Bishop f8, knight e3, bishop g7. And now the question is, what's the final blow? How do we get this game to a logical outcome? Because it already feels black is barely holding together the position. The rook can never leave the b5 square. There's going to be knight c5, knight b7. The pawn on b7 will be impossible to defend. You can't play b6, there's always a6. You can't go king h7, there's going to be rook f7. So I'm thinking, could this be a Zugzwang? Hey Avenger. So I play rook f3. I think it's a Zugzwang. Because now it's quite difficult for black to make a move. Any rook move is knight c5. Maybe he plays g5, it creates a weakness. Let's say g5, h takes, rook g5, knight c5. How do you defend the pawn on b7? What else? So maybe bishop a1, I don't know. But he played bishop f8. And now this allowed me to carry out the winning idea, which I initially saw, I thought it's flawed. So I played a6. And now the point is, after b takes, I play rook f6. I collect a lot of pawns. But then suddenly after g5, I start to get scared. Because this line is by no means obvious. f4, king f5, king g4. Oh my goodness, there could be a lot of counterplay. So I saw this, I was not sure if I can actually give a check on g6. I would just take it, g takes, just take it, collect the pawn, play b5, and this eventually should be a win. Even if he wins the pawn on h4, I think the fate of the game will be decided by this b pawn. But he did not play this, he played rook b6, which allowed me to carry out quite a nice winning idea. So the key idea, of course, is to promote the a pawn. I need a c5 square. So for this, check. Here, knight c5. The opponent resigned. Why is this? Because there's two threats, a7 and knight e7, and he can't stop both. If he plays rook a6, takes, king c5, I collect this pawn, I'm just winning the game. So until the end of the game, the black rook on b6, b5, b6, b5, wherever it was standing, it was imprisoned, and there was never any way out. So yeah, I mean, overall it was quite a nice game. And if you would like to learn some maybe better, more insight techniques on how to convert the material advantage properly, you can check out my bootcamp, GM Neiksans bootcamp. I have these educational streams, and one of them was converting material advantage, which of course is a very big topic. I mean, it's a very big topic, and that is the theme where players keep making mistakes all the time. So if you're watching this, you're thinking that you're so bad at converting material advantage to get the game from point A, where you have a big material lead, to point B, your opponent resigns, it is actually a very tricky path, right? Because there's no actual theory. There's no theory, right? There's a lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas, a lot of rules, but eventually every single position is unique.